Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hatman Strikes Back, Daily Boxing News. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Before we get onto the topics of discussion, I want to big up everybody who's locked in. You got Eldon Joe, Pop Pop Bang, Tony S, Kieran Malcolm, Chainsaw, and there's the respect. There you go. Sean, Alex. We got, got a struggle to pronounce that name, but he says for shizzle. Branch, I just call him, Tony S, Anthony YouTube, Hazaroth, David Campbell, Jack Hammer. You got Willie, Oscar, Mushy, Azzy, Dr. Wu. Big up, big up. How you guys feeling? Yems in the place. What's happening, Yems? Charlie Davis. All right. Yeshua. Greetings. Hyperspaz. If everyone can stick a like on this stream early, it'll be much appreciated. Big up, big up. Yes. All right, so let's just jump straight into it then. President Brush in the place. Yes, I am. We've got several boxing items on the docket. So first off, how many of you guys have seen this? Dana White put out a video the other day where he announced that Opetaia will fight Brandon Glanton in his first Zuffa boxing contest. But this won't be a defense of Opetaia's sanctioning body belt. Instead, it'll be for the Zuffa title. What's going on here then? Because Opetaia is somebody who proclaimed after signing to Zuffa boxing that he was going to become undisputed champion, that he was going to get those opportunities now. He'd been frustrated being co-promoted by Eddie Hearn over the past couple of years, not getting the opportunity to become undisputed. He thought, based on his comments, that he would get that opportunity with Dana White. But here we have him fighting Brandon Glanton. And bear in mind, Brandon Glanton is a guy who lost to Chris Billum Smith a couple fights back. So this isn't exactly much of a step up from the, let's say, B and C tier opponents that Opetaia has been fighting over the past few years. Again, frustrated fighting these kind of guys. But here we find him fighting one of these kind of guys again, albeit under Dana White's Zuffa promotion. So there was Opetaia thinking he would get a unification right off the bat. It was talk about a unification for Opetaia's first fight, but no, it's going to be Brandon Glanton for the Zuffa belt. No unification. Apparently his IBF cruiserweight title may not be on the line. Certainly Dana White didn't mention it. So is this a case for Opetaia of out of the frying pan into the fire? In terms of being in the boxing wilderness, it's probably not the greatest analogy in the world, but you get what I mean. Opetaia is a victim of his own success, a victim of his own ability, really. He's so formidable. He's such a devastating puncher. He's so fast and vicious and talented that it's been so far impossible trying to get any of the other cruiserweight champions in the ring with him. What do you guys make of all this? Shout out to everyone joining the live chat. Shout out to Jimmy. Ishmael says, Opetaia sold out. I have no sympathy for him now. Zerto and Benavidez have a reason to not fight him. I understand the sentiment about, selling out, helping Zuffa boxing attempt to turn the sport of boxing into something like the UFC. I get it, but it's not like the traditional boxing channels were helping Opetaia out. He was making very little money for his past few performances. Very little money. And there was no hope, no ray of light on the horizon for him. So in a situation like that, I can't even blame Opetaia for taking desperate measures. Could you describe him as that? Because the only other option for Opetaia would be to move up to heavyweight, because these cruiserweight champions, they just don't want to fight him. So what's he going to do? So personally, I don't blame him. I get it. Obviously, it's not ideal in the minds of many boxing fans for him to be joining Zuffa, but he can't force people to fight him. Dr. Wu says, I'm glad it's an affront to the traditional sanctioning bodies. All right, so that's somebody who's in favor of the Zuffa move from Opetaia. Tony S says, I don't understand why CBS isn't taking the fight. Yeah, well, I saw an interview with CBS. I didn't actually watch the interview, but I saw a thumbnail of CBS calling Opetaia a liar or something like that, saying he's not telling the truth. So presumably that's with regards to CBS and a potential Opetaia fight. President Brush says, I'm pretty sure CBS asked for something goofy like 10 million. Yeah, that really would be goofy. Considering the fact that Opetaia apparently, reportedly, has been fighting for 200 or 300 grand a fight for his last couple fights. 200 or 300 grand a fight for a cruiserweight champion. That's terrible. So if CBS was asking for anything in the millions off the back of a guy who's fighting for a couple of $100 grand a fight, that's just absurd. That just shows that you don't want to fight. I'm not saying that CBS was asking for that. That's just what President Brush is saying. Big up President Brush in the live chat. Eldon Joe says it's rough for Jaya is too. The box says, was that a bit of Jay-Z there, Hatman? I don't quite get the you got the box, but I don't quite get the reference. So Combat Short says, not many people cared about Opetaia before this. Now he is doomed for obscurity. Let's hope not. Big up Mike. We'll come on to Kabayel in a few minutes. We'll just get through some other boxing stuff first. Mike says Opetaia needs to move up to heavyweight. These cruiserweights shamelessly do not want that smoke. Big up JR. Tony S says Jai should move up to heavyweight now. He's going to end up shooting himself in the foot at cruiser, waiting around for Zerdo. He's going to end up going out of his prime when he goes to heavy. I agree. Big up Al Joey says there's a video of Opetaia's manager admitting he wants Opetaia to have the Mike Tyson effect of knocking out lower level guys and gaining excitement from fans. So I think fighting bums is the plan. Or maybe that's just their way of trying to make the best out of a bad situation. Maybe they wanted a unification right away, but since they can't get a unification right away, they're trying to spin it into something positive that he has to continue fighting lower tier opposition. Because Opetaia has been fighting plenty of lower tier opposition over the past few years. I can't imagine that's been deliberate. I have to imagine that's been the result of the other champions not wanting to fight him, and I can't imagine he would want to continue doing that under Zuffa. But who knows? Tony S says CBS has passed his prime. At least give it one last go. So Shay Turnbull says, I don't get why Jai just don't move up unless this Zuffa deal was genuinely too good not to take. As I understand it, it was a massive step up in money, which isn't hard when he was only earning 200 or 300 grand reportedly per fight for his last few. So what's a massive step up? 800 grand a fight? $1 million a fight? So a massive step up in money for Jai Opetaia. Be difficult for a guy in his position to turn that down. Moving up to heavyweight, I get the suspicion that Opetaia isn't as confident moving up to heavyweight as, let's say, Oleksandr Usyk was. But Usyk had unified, he'd become undisputed at cruiserweight. Maybe that had helped build up his confidence. Opetaia hasn't had the opportunity to do that, but I do get the impression that he's holding back a little bit because he's not yet fully confident of fighting at heavyweight. Big up Charlie Davis for the super chat. He says, how do you think Opetaia does at heavyweight? I think it really depends on the landscape at the time. Who's going to be there when he moves up? If he was to move up right now, would I pick him over Usyk? Absolutely not. Would I pick him over the likes of Wardley and Dubois? I think both of those are very difficult fights for Opetaia. I give him a chance against either, but it's perilous. We've seen Opetaia wobbled in several fights now. He's not the most difficult guy in the world to hit. He is fast. I think his power will translate at heavyweight, by the way. I do, particularly in the early rounds. But once he's in there with a big, horrible heavyweight who's pulling him into clinches and mauling him and stuff like that, sapping his energy, then his power might diminish after a few rounds. But in the early rounds, I think Opetaia's power will be formidable against the big guys. But how he holds up in terms of physical strength and endurance and grueling fights, how his chin holds up against the big boys is anybody's guess. I mean, some people might argue that there's possibly the case that Opetaia is maybe a little tight at cruiserweight now, and that could be affecting his punch resistance. Not like he's ever been knocked down or knocked out, but he's been wobbled several times now. We've seen it. So I think it depends on the landscape, but as it stands right now, I think it'd be very, very tough for Opetaia. Once Usyk is out of the way, maybe some of the bigger heavyweights are out of the way. You got the likes of Atauma, Richard Torres, the Jagbas floating around. I don't know. I don't see, let me just cut to the chase. I don't see Opetaia moving up and having the same kind of success that Usyk did. I just don't see it, irrespective of who the champions are at the time. When I'm looking at the next generation, the next crop of heavyweights coming through, I don't see Opetaia being able to go through those guys the same way because he just doesn't have the technical ability that Usyk had. Perhaps he's a more vicious puncher, but Usyk's power is underrated. So yeah, that's my take on it. I think he can be a contender. Depending on the champion, maybe pick up a belt, but I don't see him dominating at all. Afro Jam says, remember, didn't Zuffa originally claim there would be no cruiserweight? I'm not sure about that, to be fair. I know they said there's going to only be, 8 weight classes. You got Chainsaw, he says, I imagine his speed will be the best weapon at heavyweight. Yep. That'll be Opetaia's best friend. Big up everyone in the live chat locking in. We will come on to the topic, the main topic of this live stream in just a few minutes. So Thomas Leonard says, the Jordan Thompson fight was a good measuring stick for how he'll fare or how he'll fight bigger fighters. Jay Opetaia, that is. And somebody says Jordan Thompson is trash though. Well, I certainly don't expect Opetaia to have the same kind of success against most top 10 heavyweights that he had against Jordan Thompson, but it might be a decent measuring stick as far as gauging the speed difference, because the speed difference between Opetaia and Thompson was vast. And Thompson is not the slowest guy in the world. So it might show how quickly Opetaia will be able to close down the range against heavyweights. But they'll have much better chins than Jordan Thompson, much better defense than Jordan Thompson. etc. Big up GMS Nightmare for the super chat. He says, it was reported that AJ was unconscious for 10 minutes after the crash. You think this may affect his boxing chin? It's very possible. Any kind of jolt or shock to the brain can absolutely have a negative effect on your punch resistance. Did AJ's head hit anything? I mean, his brain would have obviously rattled around in his skull. Maybe that's what knocked him out if the reports are indeed true. That can cause issues, neurological problems. I mean, obviously the physical trauma that Errol Spence suffered from his car crash was far more severe than what Anthony Joshua suffered. Be that as it may, I think Errol Spence's punch resistance was not the same after that car crash. His body weren't the same overall, but his punch resistance in particular, I don't think it was the same after that crash. I think that he was more vulnerable. And in the Ugas fight, some of you guys may remember, there was a moment where he got hit with a right hand and he appeared to black out for a second. And then he went back into the ropes and then almost came to a couple of seconds later. So yeah, it's possible. And AJ never had the greatest punch resistance to begin with. So it's possible it could negatively affect his boxing, but we'll see. Because as I say, he wasn't flung through the air like Errol Spence, didn't land on his face, didn't have to have his mouth reconstructed like Errol Spence did. All his teeth were knocked out, right? So maybe AJ will be fortunate to get away with his punch resistance not being negatively affected. Time will tell. But big up GMS Nightmare for the super chat. What do you think though? Do you reckon he'll be negatively affected? And by the way, this weekend, there is the FA Jagba Charles Martin fight. That's a Zuffa boxing event. The past couple of Zuffa boxing events have actually been streamed on YouTube. I don't know whether this one will be. I certainly hope it is, because for one, it's obviously good as a boxing fan, particularly if you're not subscribed to Paramount. But for two, I think from a marketing perspective, it's a good look to be streaming these very early shows on YouTube just to raise awareness, just to get people, particularly the broader public, accustomed to the brand and everything. Maximum exposure in the early going, and then you can take it off YouTube, or at least the entire cards, maybe just have the prelims on YouTube and put the main card on Paramount. So I'm hoping that it's another free offering on YouTube this weekend with F.A. Jagba and Charles Martin. And as far as how I see that fight going, the Jagba all day. Charles Martin, some would argue, I've seen some actually make the argument that he's perhaps better now than he was earlier on in his career, even though he's older. I don't know about that. It's difficult to gauge, but Charles Martin over the past few years has been a trier. I can give him that. He tried against Luis Ortiz. He dropped Ortiz a couple times. He tried against Jared Anderson. He hurt Jared Anderson in that fight. So maybe he'll turn up against a Jagba and try to. If he does, it might be an entertaining watch. But I do expect F.A. Jagba, who is younger, who is fresher, who I think hits harder and is just all-round better, to get the job done. Oh, wow, I didn't know about this. Railway Unboxing fan says, Gabe Rosado is coming out of retirement to fight Ty Mitchell. What are your thoughts, that man? My thoughts are, why? What is all that about? Ishmael says, Hatman, there was less than 1K people watching on YouTube, no interest there. Well, that's especially why they need to keep putting it on YouTube, because YouTube is the place to get views without a paywall. So maybe that's indicative of how few views they get on Paramount. They've got enough money to promote those streams on YouTube. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can pay to promote YouTube content, and I'm sure Paramount's got more than enough money to pay to promote that. So that would be the obvious thing, I think, before locking it behind that Paramount paywall. People have to get used to the brand. You know, people are not familiar. The wider public are not familiar with Zuffa boxing yet. Yeah, I completely agree with Ishmael, though. The little UFC arena with barely any fans in doesn't help with the atmosphere. That was my one critique of the last show they did. And it was a pretty good show, by the way, the last show, where Hot Rod knocked out Vozdek. He came from behind. He'd been on the canvas a couple of times himself and knocked out Vozdek. Yeah, my criticism of that show was the fact that there was no crowd. I mean, a show like that where there were so many evenly matched fights and dramatic moments, if you'd had a crowd and you clipped the content, it would have done wonders for marketing, right? But when you don't have a crowd, knockouts don't seem as dramatic. And they're not going to be as appealing to people when that content is clipped on social media. So I'm not really sure what that's all about. I know they do it with UFC events as well, where they don't have crowds for some of them and whatnot, but they need to get some crowds in. Even if they just let people in for free, you know, put it in an arena. Dana's got enough money to absorb the cost. I'm not saying you have to do it every single time, but when there's a card as good as the last one, yeah, just put it in an arena. Obviously, you're going to be selling snacks and food, and you can make money off that to claw some money back. You're going to lose money on the show, but you claw some money back just to have the atmosphere. The box says Rosado smashes him. Okay. Big up Triassic. So, yeah, Opetaia, we've spoken about him. Brandon Glanton. Let's move on to some other news here. Some hopeful news. Some good news, potentially. The much discussed Vergil Ortiz-Jaron Ennis Jr. middleweight fight could be finalized this week for April in Las Vegas, sources told The Ring. So, it seemed as though this fight was dead in the water. Legal proceedings between Ortiz and his promoter, Golden Boy. I'm not sure what's going on that front. But somehow, some way, since Oscar has gone quiet, we're now hearing that Ortiz-Ennis might happen after all. Again, we're looking at April in Vegas. Sources have told The Ring. Sometimes when a fight is going to happen, things do go all quiet first. In fact, historically, whenever there's a load of noise from both sides, that tends to lead to problems. I think most of us know this by now. The fact they've gone quiet and they're trying to hash things out behind the scenes without all this hoopla on social media, maybe it's a good sign. If the fight does happen, and I'm certainly hoping it happens in April, I'm going to stick to my original prediction, or at least the most recent prediction I've made for this fight. I'm taking Vergil Ortiz to win. Excuse me. Oh my God, did I just say Vergil Ortiz? Was that a Freudian slip? I'm taking Jaron Ennis to win. Yeah, I'm taking Ennis to win. I think Ennis was severely dehydrated for several of his welterweight fights. I think, okay, his last opponent at 154 wasn't amazing. But I'm just looking at the speed of Ennis, the way he's able to move around, his legs. When he's hydrated like this, I think he beats Virgil Ortiz. Not that Ortiz doesn't have a chance. I think Ortiz stylistically can pose problems. If Ortiz was a more high-volume fighter, I might even be tempted to pick him. But he just doesn't throw enough for me. At least they're not enough power shots. He will throw plenty of jabs throughout the course of a fight. But as pressure fighters go, sometimes he frustrates me with his lack of punches. Yeah, he'll just go through the early rounds, putting pressure on his opponent with his feet, maneuvering him into positions, but then throwing very few power shots when he has them cornered. He just sticks a jab on him, moves around. It's only in the later rounds that he starts to open up. I guess it's a strategic thing, but I think it's also indicative of, I'm not saying having a bad gas tank, but he's very cognizant of managing his gas tank. I don't think he's somebody that has the ability to fight with a high punch output every round from the 1st to the 12th. So I think that gives the advantage to Ennis, with Ortiz being a bit too low volume, especially in the early going. I think Ennis is a very good puncher. He's fast himself. He can switch southpaw orthodox. I want to say he's taller than Ortiz. Ortiz might be listed at 5'10", but I'm not sure how accurate that particular measurement is. I think Ennis actually is 5'10", like legit. So yeah, I'll be picking Jaron Ennis if this fight does go ahead in April in Vegas. But who knows? Maybe I'll be completely wrong. Ennis doesn't have the greatest defense in the world, does he? He does tend to get clipped. What do you guys think of this news? Big up Leo Potts. He says, can you build the perfect heavyweight? Jab, right hand, left hook, right hook, uppercut, footwork, IQ, chin. From all the boxers, any era. Also love the videos. Keep up. Oh, the videos keep me sane at work. Big up Leo Potts. Thank you for the super chat. Much appreciated. Okay, so we've got an idiot here. Combat Short says, but when a black British boxer appears, Hatman is all over him. Okay, that's complete nonsense. The heavyweight who I've been bigging up the most over the past few years is a white Ukrainian. So you're someone pushing a silly agenda. Idiot. Let's get him out of here for talking rubbish. Have I ever been a big Daniel Dubois fan? Have I ever been somebody that's really high on Dubois? No. That's just talking absolute rubbish. For me, it's not about the color of the fighter. It's just about the ability, how good I think they are, the potential. Anyway, with regards to Leo Potts' super chat, I go with Larry Holmes' jab. I go with Lennox Lewis's right hand. I'm going to say not Joe Frazier's left hook, not Tommy Morrison's left hook, not David Tua's left hook. I'm going to go with Mike Tyson's left hook. Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike Tyson's left hook. As far as right hook goes, I'm going to go with Mike Tyson's right hook too. I'm also going to go with Mike Tyson's uppercut. Footwork, I'm going with Usyk. IQ, I'm going with Usyk. Chin, I'm going with Oliver McCall. So Larry Holmes' jab, Lewis's right hand, Left hook, right hook, and uppercut Mike Tyson. Footwork Usyk, IQ Usyk, chin Oliver McCall. There you go. Big up Leo Potts for the super chat. Much appreciated. Hazaroth is trolling over here. He says, jab Audley Harrison, footwork Deontay, fight IQ Jake Paul, chin David Price. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. An accident waiting to happen, should I say. Some people are saying footwork Ali. You could go with footwork Ali, but Ali's footwork, you know, Ali was more athletic than Usyk. In terms of feet, Ali probably had the most athletic feet in heavyweight history. But from a technical perspective, Ali wasn't as good technically as far as the footwork as Usyk. In my opinion, anyway. Some people are saying Vlad's right hand. In fact, let me remix it. I'm going to take away what I said previously. And I'll go with Wilder's right hand. Let me give Deontay some shine here. I'll go with Wilder's right hand. Rather than Lennox Lewis's. Wilder's. If I did the same at welterweight, I'd go Tommy Hearns for jab, Tommy Hearns right hand. I'll go Ray Leonard with all the hooks and the uppercuts. Footwork, Pacquiao, IQ Mayweather, chin. Whose chin would I go with at welterweight? Who had a really great chin? I mean, Chavez Sr., he was more of a 140-pounder, lightweight 140. I could still take his chin for 147. So let's go Chavez Sr. Any guy says, I won't believe it's happening until about round 4. Any guy says, everyone says Wilder has no skill, but if you think about it, everyone knows that right hand's coming, yet how often did it land? Well, I said that many, many times over the years. Wilder isn't very skilled overall, but he is skilled at landing his right hand. That's one skill he does have. He isn't just somebody that hits hard with the right hand. No, he was skilled at landing it. I always said that. Yeah. He did have skill in landing the right hand. He was able to time it and get his leverage and everything in sync, connecting on the opponent's jaw. Big up, Jan. What's up? What's up? All right, let's move on from this Virgil Ortiz, Jaron Ennis news. How about this one? Sources. Errol Spence Jr. to return to the ring versus Tszyu in June. Former unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. will reportedly end his nearly 3-year hiatus from boxing for a June showdown with former junior middleweight champion Tszyu in Australia, sources confirmed to ESPN on Tuesday. News of Spence's return was first reported by Ring Magazine. The fight, which will headline a PBC on Prime Video pay-per-view, will be Spence's debut at 154 pounds and is being targeted for either June 6 or June 13 at a venue in Australia to be determined. What do you guys think of this? Now, me personally, I think that Errol Spence needs to knock it on the head. Stick a fork in him, he's done. He wasn't the same after the crash, although he was still formidable offensively. He did a good job against Danny Garcia and Dennis Ugas, but as soon as he started getting hit back, as we saw in the Terence Crawford fight, it was curtains. A doctor in the run-up to Errol Spence's fight against Terence Crawford was talking about how there may be some type of trauma response when Errol Spence gets hit. A residual trauma response, should I say, from that crash because his face was all mashed up. And I think that that is exactly what we saw in the Terence Crawford fight. As soon as Spence started getting touched up, his face swole up, in my opinion, prematurely. We've seen Errol Spence get hit a lot in fights before, but his face never reacted that way previously. But in the Crawford fight, yeah, his face just ballooned up right away. And I think that was all the trauma from that crash and also the surgery. And I don't think his punch resistance was quite the same. I don't think his legs were quite the same. Again, we have to give Terence Crawford credit because Errol Spence was still good enough to beat the likes of Danny Garcia and Yordenis Ugas, who were good level welterweights. But was he at his best when he fought Terence Crawford? Definitely not. He was compromised because of that crash. But still a good fighter. But that was 3 years ago. Since that time, he was scheduled to come back against Sebastian Fundora. How you walk out of what would it have been 18 months, 2-year hiatus at the time, straight into a title fight with Fundora, I mean, that's anyone's guess, especially when you're coming off a loss. But he pulled out of that fight with an injury. I think Errol Spence's body is absolutely shot to pieces. He couldn't get through one training camp to fight Fundora. So here we are after 3 years. Will he be able to get through a training camp to fight Tszyu? I'm more at ease with Spence coming back against a guy like Tszyu than it would have been him fighting a Fundora or anybody that's in the upper echelons of the super welterweight, division right now. At least Tszyu looks like he is diminished. He's coming off a loss to Fundora himself. So it's a little bit more of an even match, but even a guy like Tszyu might be too much for Errol Spence at this stage. A prime Errol Spence, different story. But Errol Spence is way, way, way beyond his prime at this stage. The crash, the Terence Crawford beating, 3 years out the ring, the failed attempt to fight Fundora. What can we really expect from Errol Spence at this stage? What do you guys think of this one? Evil Uncle Phil says Spence getting stopped, he's going to blame it on ring rust. Crawford punched the fight out of him. Ryan Emus also thinks Tszyu is beating Spence, been more active and is younger. Neil says, I'm happy that he's back. For real? You're happy that Spence is back? Okay. Leo says Spence is done. The humiliation plus the injuries. It's better he fights Thurman. Well, Thurman's going to be fighting Fundora. Otherwise, I would have agreed with you. Evil Uncle Phil says Spence leaving Derek James was a big mistake as well. No time to gel with the new coach. And he's going into a real test. Well, yeah, apparently Errol Spence is going to be training with Roy Jones. That does not seem like a good fit. Errol Spence was always a very mechanical fighter. He reminded me a little bit, obviously not a switch hitter, but reminded me a little bit of Marvin Hagler, because Marvin Hagler was kind of mechanical as well. Spence doesn't have the athleticism to be able to implement any of the typical Roy Jones style traits, if you can call them that. The thing about Roy Jones is that he's a very positive person. And so maybe that's what drew Errol Spence to him. Roy Jones talks very positively and he's got a good vibe. So maybe that's why Spence has chosen to go there. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, been a while, Hatman. Been loads of boxing news that are being rumored. Yeah, what do you want to talk about, Ali? And I got a big you up for predicting that your boy Josh Kelly would get the win. I thought Kelly would get stopped in about 8 or 9 rounds against Murtazalayev. But you picked it bang on the money. I think you said Kelly, was it on points? And Josh Kelly did the business. It was a great performance. Chief and Kosi says, Roy Jones? LOL, yeah, he's going to get beat up. Triassic says, Spence's chin was very important for his fighting style. If that's gone, it's hard to imagine him going anywhere. I agree. Even Uncle Phil says, of all the people, Roy Jones Jr. Yeah, it is pretty random, innit? It doesn't seem like the most natural fit fighter and trainer. Roy Jones and Errol Spence. Yeah, Roy Jones has always been training a number of boxers over the past few years. Big up Ali says, yes, points, much appreciated. Much respect. Big up Ali. Josh Kelly did very, very well. You know, Josh managed to overcome his psychological demons because I do feel as though he's always had a bit of a monkey on his back ever since the Avanesian fight. Because we saw in a couple of fights where he seemed a little unsure of himself late. And it happened again against Murtazalayev. He got clipped with a big shot, went down. But this time he didn't crumble. This time he didn't panic. This time he showed great maturity, Josh Kelly. It was a coming of age fight. I mean, he's no spring chicken. He's what, 30 or 31 now, Josh Kelly? But it was as if, in a boxing sense, not in life, he finally crossed over into manhood, you know? It was a great performance. Black Dynamite says, Josh Kelly would suit Roy Jones Jr. more than Spence. I agree. John Boy says, don't know about great performance. Kelly was fighting like Malik Scott against Luis Ortiz. I disagree with that. Josh Kelly was landing the better shots. With the exception of that, was it 8th or 9th round knockdown? Josh Kelly was landing the better shots throughout most of the fight. So, no, I disagree with that. Yeah, he was running at times. But Murtazalayev just wasn't landing enough. Wasn't landing anything clean, you know? Most of Murtazalayev's shots were coughing shots, the odd jab here and there. Kelly was landing the clean shots. And that's what you look for in a fight. That's a good shout, actually, Chief and Cozy. He says, I always thought Errol Spence would benefit from training with Abel Sanchez. That seems like a good fit. I agree with that. KO Talk says Spence must be broke. Maybe. That's possible. Or perhaps he just feels like he doesn't want to go out on a loss. And not just any loss, his first loss and a humiliating loss. Maybe he doesn't want to be remembered like that. So maybe it's about more than money. Maybe it's about redemption. Because Terence Crawford put a hell of a beating on him. In such a big event, to be humiliated like that, it's going to weigh on your mind. Especially when you're an unbeaten fighter. You're prideful, you know? Okay, that's a cynical comment, but perhaps it's accurate. Any guy says, is it a coincidence that he comes back just as Bud retired? Yeah, that's a good point you make there. Perhaps not. Perhaps it's not a coincidence. Jurassic says, redemption is powerful, like Teddy Atlas often says. All right, let's move on then to the main topic of this live stream. As you can see here, this was a post put up on Instagram by Queensbury Promotions. The heavyweight landscape just shifted. The WBC have ordered Oleksandr Usyk to defend the WBC World Heavyweight title against Agit Kabayel immediately after Voluntary. So it's not next, or not necessarily next. It could be, but they're going to allow Oleksandr Usyk a Voluntary first. Okay, but they're saying, they're starting to put pressure on him now, basically. They're saying, you need to get a move on here. Because they were going to order, ostensibly, Cabayel, or Usyk to fight Cabayel after Usyk's Voluntary anyway. So the fact they're announcing the order before Usyk has had his Voluntary is a sign of pressure. They're saying to Usyk, they're telling him, get a move on. It's rare for the WBC to do something like this. It's a welcome surprise in this particular instance, because as great a fighter as Oleksandr Usyk has been throughout his career, over the past few months, ever since the Daniel Dubois rematch, he's been on some BS. Let's be real. Now, I want to reiterate what I've said before. I do not begrudge Oleksandr Usyk having a Voluntary defense after all these unifications and mandatories and whatnot. Don't begrudge him a Voluntary defense at all. The only issue I have is the opponents he's targeting for this Voluntary defense. He's looking for the lowest hanging fruit imaginable. And it gets even worse because he was looking for Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz apparently before. I'm going to come on to the guy there saying Usyk might fight instead, which is an absolute shocker. But let's just work through the Kabayel situation. So the headline reads, Oleksandr Usyk giving ultimatum over Voluntary title defense. Interim champion next. That's obviously Agit Kabayel. Mauricio Sullivan said that Cabayel must be next for Usyk after the Voluntary defense, which will be his next fight. And he said, well, now this is Wilder's manager Shelley Finkel talking about why the fight didn't happen. Klimas was talking about okay, this is him talking about Wilder, I think, and as well, it's in the United States. But that fight's not happening now. Wilder's obviously fighting Derek Chisora. Mauricio Sullivan, not Jose Sullivan. His dad was Jose Sullivan. Mauricio Sullivan said Cabayel was not available because he had a fight scheduled in January. So Usyk requested a Voluntary title defense, which is very customary. He was given an opportunity and he must fight the interim champion next. That's the ruling. Well, as far as Cabayel being busy, I mean, would he have been too busy to fight Usyk? He may have had a fight scheduled, but if Usyk had said, yeah, let's do the fight now, surely he would have just dropped out of that and taking the opportunity to fight Usyk instead, unless there were some legal ramifications. He might have had to come up with a fake injury if there was a contract signed with a different opponent. But either way, it's good that the WBC are apparently now applying some pressure and saying Usyk needs to get a move on and we get this fight across the line. So the question is, will he have the voluntary defense, or will he just end up fighting Kabayel next? Let me just reduce the volume on my mic a little bit here. It's a bit hot. Yeah, will he actually have a first defense, or will it be Cabayel next? Now, the talk is, and this is really shocking, that Usyk's defense is voluntary, maybe against this guy, a kickboxer called Rico, is it Van Hoven? I'm going to say Rico Van Hoven, a kickboxer who's only had one professional fight in his whole career. He looks a bit like Daniel Craig in the face somehow. Slightly, right? So he's a massive guy, kickboxer out of the Netherlands, as so many kickboxers have been over the years. It's always been a big sport there. Surprisingly, they've got his kickboxing record on BoxRec. I didn't know BoxRec were also branching out into kickboxing records, but there's his boxing record. He had one fight back in 2014 in boxing, which he won by KO in the second round. And his kickboxing record is 54-10, with 2 of his 10 losses coming by knockout or stoppage. Perhaps his kickboxing record is more extensive than this, and maybe BoxRec don't have it all, but they certainly have a lot of his fights listed. Now, why is this so shocking? I mean, it goes without saying, but in case there's anyone who can't put it together, this guy isn't ranked in the top 15 of any of the major 4 sanctioning bodies. Obviously, Usyk holds 3 belts now. He's not ranked in the top 15 of any of them. So it would take the usual boxing, I'm going to call it corruption. Or at least, if you don't want to call it corruption, you could call it farcical ranking for Usyk to be allowed a voluntary against this guy. Because he hasn't fought in professional boxing since whenever, 2014? So for him to be ranked and therefore be eligible to fight Oleksandr Usyk in a voluntary, the sanctioning body, one of the 3 that Usyk holds a belt for, would just have to go hocus pocus, abracadabra, wave a magic wand, and put the guy in their top 15 for no reason. No fights, no ranking matches, nothing. Just abracadabra, there you go. A spot in the top 15, you're fighting Usyk. Ridiculous. If Usyk is to fight this guy, it needs to be in a non-title bout. If it's a non-title bout, okay, cool. But if it's any type of title defense, it will be one of the most scandalous things I've seen in boxing for many a year. If Usyk wants a voluntary defense against a relatively soft touch, there's plenty of options out there. This would be going even lower than fighting a Deontay Wilder or an Andy Ruiz. Yeah? The options out there for him if he wants an easy, and look, in heavyweight boxing, anything can happen. Maybe it's not good to say that anything is a given easy fight when you're dealing with top 10 heavyweights. But on paper, at least, given Usyk's pedigree and experience and who he's beaten and who the guys I'm about to mention haven't beaten and their recent form, I mean, surely on paper these would look like comfortable evenings for Oleksandr Usyk. Both Perro brothers are available, those Cuban heavyweights. Neither of them has looked impressive. Nelson Heiser, where is he from, Albania or something? So he's an obscure Eastern European heavyweight who was signed up by Frank Warren. He's at number 4 with the WBA. So all of these guys would qualify, whether people agree with it or not, for a shot at Oleksandr Usyk as a voluntary. Guido Vianello, is he even coming off a win? I'm not sure. But if Usyk wanted a comfortable title defense, Vianello's there. Richard Riakporhe, he can punch, but I don't think he's the greatest fighter in the world. He's a guy that Usyk should be able to deal with relative comfort. So why Usyk feels the need to look outside of the top 15 for an easy voluntary defense is beyond my understanding. Now, some people are claiming, and I think I've heard Eddie Hearn maybe say this in an interview, don't quote me, that it's actually Kabayel Usyk who's insisting that Usyk fights this guy. I have no idea why. Has he been involved in kickboxing events that have been promoted by Kabayel Usyk? Does Kabayel Usyk have some kind of involvement in Rico Van Hoven's career? I don't know. But it's curious if that is the case, that it's Turkey pushing for Usyk to fight this guy, because Turkey is normally pushing for the best to fight the best. He's not normally pushing for pound fighters to take on obscure kickboxers. It's not like this is a Francis Ngannou who was a big name in UFC. I've never heard of this guy. Kickboxing isn't as big globally as UFC, right? So what do you guys think of this? Big up James Clifford for the super chat. Big up Luca for the super chat. Scrolling up here to catch the super chats. Luca says Usyk will lose to Cabayel. He's nearly 40. Yeah, what is he, 39 now, Usyk? Big up Ali. He says that is disgraceful and should not be allowed. I agree. Let's hope it isn't allowed. Let's hope Usyk goes directly into the Cabayel fight. Big up James Clifford. He says, ever since Usyk split with his promoter Alex Krasuk, I feel Usyk has gone sideways, giving Dubois an unnecessary rematch and talking about Wilder. I'm not sure if it's Krasuk or not, the absence of him, that has led to Usyk switching up his behavior. Because to be fair, fighting Dubois a second time, although it wasn't ideal, it's hardly a cherry pick, because Dubois was in the form of his career going into that Usyk rematch. He'd taken down AJ, taken down Miller, taken down Hrgovic. He was on a great run. So it wasn't exactly a pick'em, what's the word I'm looking for? A cherry pick, excuse me. Wasn't exactly a cherry pick for Usyk, that Dubois rematch. So, I don't know. I just think that Usyk has got one foot out the door, and he wants some big cash out fights for minimal effort. I think that's what he's looking, excuse me. I think that's what he's looking for. Getting a little tired here. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. It's disappointing. I would rather Usyk just retire at the top than start engaging in partridge type behavior. Afro Jam says Van Hoven was a big name 15 years ago. That's crazy. So he was a big name in kickboxing 15 years ago. So Little Jacob says, Rico will be decent in a boxing ring. Okay. Whether he'll be decent in a boxing ring is neither here nor there. He hasn't earned a top 15 ranking. That's the point. So why should he be getting an opportunity to fight for the unified world heavyweight title? Why should Usyk be fighting a guy like that when there are tried and tested heavyweights available for a voluntary defense? That's the point. Cobzilla says, I can't knock it. We would all do the same, easy money. Well, maybe, but sanctioning bodies are supposed to be there to make sure that fighters don't take the biscuit. Triassic says Usyk got initiated by Partridge to the dark side. King James says Dave Allen would not Rico cold. The Rumford Bull would as well. Wow. If he's that bad, then that really would be shocking. John Boy says, might as well fight Bas Rutten. Did anyone ever see that Bas Rutten self-defense training video? That was hilarious. Unfortunately, you can't find the full video on YouTube anymore. But way back in the YouTube golden age, he had like the Bas Rutten self-defense instruction video in several parts. It was proper funny. King James says Bas Rutten would have been handy on the doors. Well, he worked the doors for many years. Any guy says, yes, Hatman, I used to love that video. He's a madman, but I wouldn't say it to him. Yeah, he showed lots of different techniques in that video, that self-defense video, pertaining to working on the doors. Like he showed you the best way to stand if you're a bouncer and someone is trying to confront you or get aggressive, the best way to stand and how to position your hands and all that kind of stuff. Am I looking forward to Wilder's documentary? I mean, maybe for a laugh, for a bit of comedy. Because Deontay Wilder is so idiotic, he's so dumb, that what he thinks is slam dunk smoking gun evidence is almost certainly going to be nothing of the sort. Because if he had smoking gun evidence, he would have gone to the boxing authorities, or maybe even the legal authorities. If a guy put egg weights in his gloves, that's a criminal offense. That's not just breaking boxing rules, that's breaking, like, literally the law of the land. That's assault with a deadly weapon. He could get that Partridge, or maybe more than one of those Partridge results overturned if he had that type of evidence. Folks, the reason he hasn't done that is because he doesn't have that type of evidence. Deontay Wilder, he's talking rubbish. He's delusional and he's an idiot. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, Kell Brook is fighting this month or something. Yeah, I've heard Kell Brook is fighting. I've seen a couple of interviews with Dominic Ingle where he alluded to it. No idea why Kell Brook is deciding to fight on against God knows who. I think it's a charity fight, is it? That's right, Summers Boxing. Bass's sound effects in those videos always make me laugh. Dangada, dangada, dangada. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Yeah, it sounds random unless you've actually seen the video. Then you'll know what I'm referring to. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Right straight, left hook, right straight, on the ground. Use the ambience. You guys remember that bit? Where Bass was like, use the ambience. There's one part in that video where he recommends, like if you're in a restaurant or something, you get into a fight, grab the hot sauce and put hot sauce on your hands Smearing in his eyes. Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, the hot sauce palm strike. Palm strike, right straight. Dangada, dangada, dangada. Okay, big up Ali for the super chat. He says, it's for the late tribute of Ricky Hatton. There you go. Ali, a Ricky Hatton fan. Very unfortunate passing of Ricky Hatton. Yes, Joey, I spoke about the FA Jagba Charles Martin fight this weekend. I'm hoping, like the previous two Zuffa boxing cards, it's streamed for free on YouTube. Because I don't have Paramount. The saying says, Hatman, are you afraid to die or do you want to live forever? I don't want to die. No, I'm not afraid to die. I wouldn't want to die a painful death. But in terms of actually not being here anymore, I'm not afraid at all. I've actually spoken about this in some previous streams. We had a conversation. There was a guy, I think, who was Oriental, Japanese maybe, and he was talking about how afraid he is of death. I'm not afraid at all. Again, not like I want to die a violent death. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But not being here anymore, does that frighten me? No. I mean, perhaps I'd feel different if I had kids. You know? You got kids, you want to look after them and make sure that you see the job through till they're adults and you've raised them to be and taught them everything they need to be independent of you. Maybe then I'd be afraid, but not afraid for me, afraid for my kids, you know? But as things stand right now, no, not at all. I'm actually quite intrigued about what lies beyond. Pick up Ali says, Charles Martin, AJ gloves are off. I walk this earth like a god. Yeah, that will forever live in infamy, won't it? Any guy says, if you are religious, fair enough, but if not, how can death scare you? You'll be dead. You won't even know you're dead. Well, not just if you're religious, but if you are spiritual, right? There are people who are not necessarily religious, but they believe in an afterlife. Myself, I'm agnostic. I'm not an atheist. Being agnostic, I am open to the possibility that that the spirit, if there is such a thing, survives beyond the body. In fact, I suspect that is the case. I don't know. It's only a suspicion. But I suspect that consciousness survives beyond the body. I could be wrong. We're all going to find out one day. Where consciousness goes after that, if it does survive beyond the body, we'll see. I'm intrigued to find out. Not too soon, you understand, but you know. Because I've always been a very intrepid person. I've always been interested in the mysteries of life and the mysteries of the universe. And so a person like me is hoping to get answers in death. Do you know what I mean? That's why it doesn't really frighten me, because I'm like, maybe I'll get some answers. Hopefully not the wrong answers. But answers As I just said, I'm agnostic. What about Brook versus Eubank Jr.? Yeah, they could do that fight, I guess. Because Eubank Jr. really needs to knock it on the head. So if he was to fight Brook, who's been out since the Khan fight and issues outside the ring, maybe. But it couldn't be at 160. For the sake of Eubank Jr.'s health, it'd have to be at 168. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, Hatman, do you ever think Sky will ever release the AJ Miller gloves are off in full? I don't know. There might be a legal issue because AJ, of course, used to be a Sky fighter. That footage might be owned by Sky. Now, AJ owns the rights to his fights. That's why his fights are on his YouTube channel, or at least he owned the rights to his fights that were on Sky. That's why they're all on his YouTube channel. But did he own the rights, or does he own the rights to the face-off with Miller? I'm not sure about that. If he does own the rights to his face-off with Miller, then it's at AJ's discretion whether that footage comes out or not. If he doesn't own the rights, then presumably it's at Sky's discretion. If it was at their discretion, I thought they would have released it by now. Just for the views, you know? So I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure whether they'll release it or not. Maybe if AJ signs to fight Jarrell Miller, they will. And perhaps that's a possibility. What do you think, Ali? Do you think they'll release the footage? So let me put it this way. I think they will release it at some point in the future. But it might be decades in the future. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be while they're both still active heavyweights. Ali says Johnny Nelson will definitely know something. What, as in who has the legal rights to the footage? I don't know. Okay, Kira Malcolm says there's two different gloves are off. One was on DAZN and the other one was on Sky. I think Miller walked off the DAZN face-off. Okay, that's interesting. Let me switch up the visuals here. We've spoken about Usyk. The final topic which I had on the docket here, was unsurprising. It feels like Groundhog Day. Exclusive! Tyson Fury wants to fight Oleksandr Usyk again. He wants to be the best, says promoter Frank Warren, ahead of comeback. Tyson Fury has already cemented his legacy, says promoter Frank Warren, but he explains the former two-time heavyweight champion, world champion's motivations, for returning to boxing. Tyson's a fighting man. He loves it, Warren said. He wants to be the best. That's how he's always been. He wants to be the best. That's how he's always been. Fighting man loves it. He goes in the gym. When he gets down to serious training, he wants to see an end result. And the end result for him is fighting. For me, he doesn't need to fight. He cemented his legacy. But he is fighting on. And he's going to be a great addition to the heavyweight scene. He's a great personality. The crowds come out for him. This is a big moment for his career. If he's going to come back, I'd much rather he do it now than in 4 or 5 years' time, when his powers will probably be diminished then. So that's the latest on Luke Partridge, aka Tyson Fury, reiterating apparently behind the scenes he wants another crack at Usyk. He's telling his promoter Frank Warren, get me that fight. But you know what, folks? It might seem unlikely to some, but I think the AJ Partridge fight is going to happen. I think it's going to happen this year. I think AJ is going to be back in a boxing ring sooner than people realize. And in fact, even Eddie Hearn said this in one of his most recent interviews over the past few days, that he thinks AJ is going to be back in the ring sooner rather than later. Somebody earlier on said that they're picking Glanton to KO Opetaia. That's an interesting pick. Glanton's very tough, and he can punch. But he did just get outpointed by Chris Billum Smith. I know styles make fights and all that, but is Glanton really going to take Opetaia into the deep waters and drown him? If he can take Opetaia's power and get close to him, then maybe there's a possibility. Will Opetaia's power keep him honest, keep him on the outside? Or will he march through it? Yeah, the CBS fight was close, but still, he lost to CBS. Casa says Partridge, the gamekeeper, will cash in the AJ chips. Maybe summer 27. I think they're going to fight this year. I think AJ and Partridge are going to fight this year. I think AJ is going to be back sooner than you realize. He's going to win. And then I reckon we'll see the Partridge fight happen in November or December. Clark says Fury will lose the Makhmudov fight and just say, screw it. Let me take the cash out against AJ. I'd be very surprised if Fury lost to Makhmudov. Even a diminished version of Fury should be able to beat him. Makhmudov is no great shakes. He got stopped by Guido Vianello. If you get stopped by Guido Vianello, even Partridge at 50% should be beating you. Afro Gem says Eddie Hearn claimed he had nothing for Opetaia. Maybe he didn't. Because it seems that Zuffa don't have anything for him either. Other than bigger paychecks. Because he was supposed to be fighting in a unification for his first fight. JR says, I'd rather see Bellew versus Cleverly 3 than Partridge getting the trilogy. Bellew versus Chilemba. That was another horrific affair. Who would win, the Fury who turned up against Ngannou or Makhmudov? To be honest with you, I think Ngannou Makhmudov is a competitive fight. I don't think Makhmudov for me is not really a top 10 heavyweight. Not at this stage anyway. Maybe at one stage he was, but now I don't think so. Big up Mr. Luca, he says, could have probably put on Usyk, Fabio Wardley at Wembley. I agree. Big up Mr. Luca. Afro Jam says Glanton is a step up. There are a few other guys like CBS, Pertala. God, I'm struggling to pronounce some of these names. Who would have fought Opetaia, but he fought the weakest guys. Well, I'm not sure whether he could have got the CBS fight at a reasonable price. But yeah, Glanton's a step up from his last few. If he says, Hatman, none of these fights sell. Rico is a huge crossover event. Huge? I don't know about that. A massive star where? Where is Rico a massive star? I've literally never heard of him before in my life. And I've heard of UFC guys, you know? All right, I guess he's being sarcastic. Yeah, I know he was never in UFC, but I'm saying to claim that he's really famous doesn't make sense to me because I never heard of him, right? If it's because I'm not into kickboxing, then how come I've heard of all the UFC guys? That's the point I was making. Because I'm not a UFC guy, but I've heard of the UFC guys. Alex Pereira, Ngannou, John Jones, etc., etc. If he was really famous, then how come I've not heard of him? I've never heard of him in my life. So I'm guessing If He Sounds is trolling here. Do I know any K1 fighters? Yeah, I know K1 fighters from back in the days. Like Crow Cop and guys like that. Even Bob Sapp was a K1 guy back in the days. K1 is not what it used to be. K1's no longer anywhere near as popular. Like UFC is popular. So in order to be really well known and really famous, you gotta at least be a UFC guy. Or a boxing guy. Kickboxing is, as people say, it's a niche sport, it's obscure. The Fog Seller says K1 doesn't exist anymore. Okay. K1 was it a Japanese kickboxing promotion or league? It was based out in Japan. Yeah, I remember all those guys, like Alistair Overeem. I remember them guys. Remy Bajansky, and is that his name? Bajansky? Is that how you pronounce it? Remy something. That black guy from the Netherlands. So I was aware of the back in the days. Who was that guy from France? I forget his name now. Who's still fighting, who shouldn't be fighting, who got knocked out a couple of years back. That famous kickboxer from France. What's his name again? No, not Hoost. He's Dutch. Labana, yes. Labana. I swear he's still fighting, isn't he, Labana? That's like 50 years old, he's still fighting. Yeah, Jerome Labana. Like, why is he fighting? Okay, Striker is correcting someone. He says K1 does still exist. All right. Ali says, I suspect all the people hyping up this Rico guy is to defend Usyk fighting him. Yeah, we're casual combat sports fans. Yeah. But since I'm a casual combat sports fan, other than boxing, boxing's the only combat sport that I'm a hardcore in. Every other combat sport, I'm a casual. So I'm a good barometer then for who's actually well known. If I don't know him, he's not well known. Because I represent, outside of boxing, I represent the casual fan. The casual MMA fan, casual kickboxing fan, super casual. So I'm a good barometer. Never heard of the guy before in my life. Yeah, I remember Ray Safo. I was always fascinated in K1 by Bob Sapp because the guy was like physically enormous. But whenever he got hit with anything resembling a solid punch, he would fall on the floor and start rolling around in agony. It was the weirdest thing. He's just so physically massive and intimidating. But as soon as he got hit with anything, big up Charles B in the chat. As soon as Bob Sapp got hit with anything looking like a solid blow, he was on the canvas rolling around. Bob Sapp is the epitome of big for nothing. You guys know that phrase, big for nothing? Bob Sapp was literally big for nothing, bro. An absolute physical phenom. But he just couldn't fight to save his life. I mean, don't get it twisted. If he managed to get hold of you, and start throwing you around, you'd be in trouble. But when he was in there against anyone that knew how to handle themselves, yeah, most of the time he got battered. Bob Sapp was like an optical illusion. I remember when he fought some little Oriental guy. I say little, the guy might have been big. But because Bob Sapp was so gigantic, he looked little in comparison. He fought what looked like a little, I don't know, Oriental guy. And he came out and he was throwing him around and, you know, the Bob Sapp Incredible Hulk rage. And he did that for a couple minutes. And then he got taken down and beaten up. But realistically, how many roids was Bob Sapp doing? Because there's just no way on God's green earth, with the greatest genetics known to mankind, that you could be that size naturally. No way. How many roids was he doing? And that really speaks to the PED testing or lack thereof in K1. A man like Bob Sapp's in there. Oh yeah, I remember Bob Lashley. Yeah, he was a unit too. Yeah, somebody's forgetting this is a boxing channel. Ah, yeah, that's a good point. Afro Jam says a lot of those guys who failed drug tests in boxing were kickboxers, Dylan White and Jerome Miller. Was Jerome Labana ever popped for PEDs? Because he was massive as well in his prime. Like, Jerome Labana was enormous in his prime, bro. It was like 6'5", 270 pounds or something, solid muscle, ripped, abs and pecs and everything. I'm like, yo, is that really natural? Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, Hatman, Keyshawn Davis versus Devin, who you got? Is it possible Keyshawn's special to where he whoops Devin's behind to where he's James Toney? Yeah, I think Keyshawn Davis beats Devin Haney. I think he does beat him. Devin did well against the last opponent. A return to form of sorts, Brian Norman. But yeah, I think Keyshawn Davis has the youth, the power, the speed. Keyshawn Davis, for me, much better than Brian Norman. Big up Charles B for the super chat. It says, catch the replay tomorrow. Big up Charles B every time. That's my guy. Matt Borgerson says, have you ever seen the lats of kickboxers? Juice. Yeah, some of them kickboxers are massive, bro. But if there was ever a smoking gun, at least for K1, it's got to be Bob Sapp. Like, come on, man. The guy just looked like a walking pharmacy to me. There's no way you can be that size naturally. Just no way. How much did Bob Sapp actually weigh when he was fighting? Like 300 pounds? 300 pounds of solid muscle. You know, Bob Sapp was solid muscle. And he had that roid gut. You know, where he's actually got abs popping out, but his belly is like protruding, even though there's abs on it. Yeah, he had all that going on. We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. It says Keyshawn Davis has a lot of similarities to Crawford. I think he could be in that ilk, but time will tell. Also, we'll get a better resume too. So I don't personally think he's going to go on to be as good as Crawford. No, I don't see him being another Crawford personally. But I do see him beating a Devin Haney. You know, Devin Haney is a fighter who I have a lot of respect for because of the fact that he's a grafter. Devin Haney's never been the most naturally talented or gifted fighter. He doesn't have the most amazing athleticism. You know, I've seen Devin Haney in person a couple of times. I've actually seen him training. And the first thing that struck me is that he's very small. The second thing that struck me is that he's not very athletic. I mean, this is going to sound wild to people, all right? And you can totally dismiss it as somebody talking rubbish on the internet if you wish. But I'm just telling you, folks, and I wouldn't say this unless, from my perspective, it was completely true, all right? But I've seen Devin Haney hitting the bag up close and hitting pads. And I'm telling you, I've got faster hands than Devin Haney. Maybe not, well, I'm not in my mid-40s. The time when I saw him was several years ago. But as a heavyweight, my fighting weight was, 230 pounds, give or take. I was faster than Devin Haney, at least in terms of hand speed. Maybe not foot speed, but hand speed faster than Haney. I say all that not to say that I'm the fastest heavyweight that ever existed, but to say that Devin Haney really is not very athletic compared to his contemporaries. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't be sitting here telling you that I got quicker hands than Tank Davis or I got quicker hands than Shakur Stevenson or whoever, but Devin Haney's not that fast. When you see him hitting bag, hitting pads, he's not that fast. That's why I have so much respect for him. Because he's a guy that's got to where he's got to, having to overcome a lack of athleticism compared to his rivals, right? And he is relatively athletic, more so with his feet, but his hands are not that quick. And he's just not a natural athlete like that. Like, one of the things about Devin Haney that you notice, you see this when you watch his fights, but even more so in person, is that he's got a very big head in proportion to his body. And somehow that just doesn't work with his body type as far as being really athletic. It's like his head is a bit too big for his body. It just knocks everything off kilter a little bit. Wow, Encircled says Bob Sapp was in the 320s. Not fat like Miller either, but muscle. Yeah, Crawford not the greatest athlete, but Crawford's still a much better athlete than Haney. A way better athlete than Haney. Haney really, seeing him up close, I was like, wow, he's really not athletic. He's really not athletic. Because I've seen plenty of guys his weight range, from let's say lightweight up to 147 in person. And you can see like for example, Kell Brook. I've seen Kell Brook up close. Kell Brook is way more athletic than Devin Haney. I mean, in a totally different universe as far as athleticism. Haney's really not athletic. I mean, there's some degree of athleticism there, obviously, but when comparing him to, other top fighters in and around his weight class, he's really not athletic. I mean, Ryan Garcia is way more athletic than Devin Haney. Haney's just a guy who gets himself super duper fit, and he's a real trier, brave, but he doesn't have the natural ability of a Tank Davis, of a Shakur Stevenson, of a Teofimo Lopez, of a Ryan Garcia. These are all much more athletic fighters than Haney. Matt Borgerson, big up. He says, I think Keyshawn versus Boots is a good future fight. Can Keyshawn really go up that many weight classes? I don't know, man. You'd have to be real good to end up fighting Boots. I mean, Boots is going to be at 160 before long. I'd be surprised if that fight happens. Okay, Matt Borgerson's doubling down. He says 100%. He's big. Pause. 5'11". Okay, is he 5'11"? Didn't realize he was that tall. Doesn't come across as being that tall, and the fights of his I've seen. JR says you needed a pause when you said you've seen Brook up close. All right, let me retroactively pause on seeing Brook up close. Yeah, Brook's very athletic. Brook, like if you see him training up close, very athletic. His hands are very snappy. You know, he hits the pads and his bam, 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 big snap. Big crack when he hits the pads and all that. Yeah, Brook definitely lacks flexibility. He is stiff. Pause, but he's athletic with it. Whereas with Haney, is just... he's small and not particularly athletic. Casa says Brook possibly the last of the Ingle style. Well, which Ingle style do you mean? Because there's the Brendan Ingle style, then there's the Dominic Ingle style. And the styles are quite different. Dominic Ingle style is far more conventional. The Brendan Ingle style, extremely unconventional. Really the Harold Graham style, which became popular at that gym. Casa says Brendan Ingle style, but Brook never had the Brendan Ingle style. I remember when Brook was on the way up, people kept comparing him to Prince Nassim, and I'm like, he's literally nothing like Prince Nassim, so I'm not sure where the comparisons are coming from. You got Matt Borgerson, he says, a long reach is more important than height, Hatman. That's why Crawford was so effective against Canelo. 74-inch of jab will surpass weight classes. Yeah, I mean, Adonis Stevenson was only 5'10", but he had a 78-inch reach, and so he was able to outbox cruiserweights who were like 6'2", 6'3", because he had go-go gadget arms. To be even more precise, as Encircled said, arm length is what matters rather than reach, because there is a different measurement to reach. But yeah, Matt, your point is very well taken. When you've got crazy long arms like a Crawford, you don't need as much height. Because of course you do get some tall guys with relatively short arms. Diego Corrales, for example, when he fought Mayweather, he was getting peppered on the outside because his height didn't really mean anything. Mayweather had the longer arms. Encircled says Ingle is so strange. Yeah, I found Dominic Ingle strange too. He's got this like really... He never smiles, does he, Dominic Ingle? Or ever laughs. He always sits there with his arms folded and... Is he trying to act like a tough guy or something? I don't know what it is with Dominic Ingle. He does have a strange demeanor. Oh, wow. Hoopla says Malik Scott doubling down on the cheating claims from Wilder on the DAZN show. Is that on the Ring show? You talking about the Ring one? I'll have to go and watch that. Yeah, Malik Scott working with his wife is just weird. I don't know why they've paired those two together. Are they thinking it's going to be like the Richard and Judy of boxing or something? It's just weird, man. But speaking of long arms, I mean, Boots Ennis has got a 74-inch reach. Don't know what his arm length is, but the reach is 74 inches. We got Matt B Music. He says, how excited are you for a Jagba versus Charles Martin this weekend? I wouldn't say I'm super excited, but I'm intrigued. And I hope it's on YouTube. So I won't have to watch some unreliable stream. Because the last couple of Zuffa cards have been on YouTube. I'm hoping this one is too. We got Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, Boots doesn't use his jab well. Pity patter a lot. He uses his jab to set up the power shots, right? We got Matt Borgerson. Matt says he uses it like Yard. I hate it. I think he uses it a bit better than Yard, but I take your point. But he's a much better fighter than Yard. Boots Ennis, way better. So even if he doesn't use the jab that much, he compensates for it in other ways. Big up Matt Borgerson. He says, I still think Virgil wins. Yeah, I think Ennis wins. I just don't think Virgil throws enough punches. And I think Virgil will be susceptible to Ennis's power. We've seen Virgil on the canvas. We haven't seen Boots Ennis on the canvas. Obviously, Virgil's been fighting at 154 for a while now. But still, I just don't think Virgil throws enough shots. And I think Ennis can get to him with the power. And I think Ennis is a lot better fully hydrated now at 154. I think he has a lot more energy. And he can use his feet to get away and then jump in with power shots and whatnot. But it's a good fight. That's why we want to see it, right? It's a good fight. Anyway, peeps, I'm going to draw an end to this live stream. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me. A special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. Let me just refresh this. Always have to refresh the tab before I can big everyone up. Okay, so yes, those who donated were Charlie Davis, big up, GMS Nightmare, Leah Potts, Ali, Mr. Luca, James Clifford, Copezilla, Matt Borgerson, of course, Charles B. Yeah, big up everyone who donated via Super Chat and everyone else for joining the conversation. It's been great as always. Until next time, take care, be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.